God is the villain in the story of Job. So many times Christians reference this story basically to tell me how important faith is. However, I cannot understand how God comes across as anything but the villain in this story. So I reread the story just to make sure I wasn't remembering anything incorrectly. And oh my God, it's worse than I even remembered. So if you're not familiar, this is the story of Job, and I'm only going to go through literally the first chapter because honestly, I probably have to do a whole series because there's so much here. But the story of Job is basically this man who God views as blameless and perfect and wonderful. And I'm going to make this a little bigger so you can see. So Job is living his life, loving God, and this happens. The angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. So I know that like Satan is maybe translated as like the accuser or something. So most Christians believe this is the devil, Satan, but maybe it's actually not. Regardless. So Satan comes and says, "Hey, God, I'm here." And God wants to show off Job. And so he says, "Have you considered my servant Job? No one is like him. He's blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." And Satan basically is taunting God in response. And he says, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has?" Basically saying that, well, look, of course Job loves you. You give him all this good stuff. But verse 11 says, "Now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he surely will curse you to your face." And what is God's response? Not, "Get out of here, Satan. Don't be ridiculous. I can see the future. Let me tell you what would happen." No, God says, "Bet," basically. So that's what God does. God says, "Okay, Satan, you can take all these things from him." He loses all of his cattle, he loses all of his wealth, and then he loses his children. And so at the end of, this is all in the first chapter. At the end of the first chapter, this is what we see. So Job is understandably incredibly upset. And at the end of the chapter, it says, "In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing." So the takeaway is that God orchestrated this. God said, "Yeah, let's do this. This is a good idea." So clearly God is responsible for these things that are happening to Job. And Job's only crime was being faithful to God when he had good things. And what God is looking for is for Job to not blame God for the things that God did. It's so frustrating to read this because this is such a prime example of how Christianity refuses to hold God responsible for anything. Nothing is ever God's fault, even when it's so clear that, yeah, this is exactly God's responsibility. Why shouldn't Job charge God with wrongdoing? God did those things. I know this was a long one. If you made it all the way till the end, Ruby says, "Thank you. Oh, you need belly rubs."